I balance on the edge of my parents' needlepoint armchair, the one that's lived under the bay window longer than I have lived anywhere. White lights coil around the fir tree and throw tiny halos onto the glass frames lining the wall. Vacations, graduations, birthdays, photos, where my smile looks practiced, as if it were ironed flat before each click. Clove-studded oranges ride the air from the sideboard. Dad's old stereo murmurs a winter jazz record. The room is warm, but something inside me keeps its coat on. Kara squeals first. She is 26, with the choreography of 16, and her hands move so fast, the ribbon tangles itself into surrender. "Oh my God, Mom! Dad, this is it!" Gold paper gives way to a cream leather purse with a subtly brushed logo. She pronounces the brand carefully, like a prayer you want witnesses for. "You shouldn't have," she adds, beaming, "exactly so." Mom's laugh lands in that well-worn groove between pride and certainty. "Only the best for our baby." Dad, all satisfied, nods, says, "You deserve it, kiddo. My box is smaller." No, not a box. An envelope the weight of a restaurant napkin sealed with a sparkly snowflake sticker. I know enough not to rush. The tree lights find the glitter as I peel it open and slide out a card. Silver peaks, blue sky tidy, serif letters. Season's greetings. Inside nothing. No note, no gift card, no check. The paper creaks when I close it again. I press the fold flat with my thumb and tuck it into my skirt pocket, as if I'm saving a ticket stub to a show I didn't see. Across the room, Aunt Ruth's mouth opens a fraction, then closes. Her eyes meet mine and soften into a kind of apology you can only give with your gaze. Dad glances at his watch and clears his throat. "We'll need to leave by 7 if we want to beat the rush at Marzano's." Mom pours Kara more eggnog without once finding my face. "Look how the leather catches the light," Kara says, as if auditioning for a commercial, turning the bag to the room, to the tree, to her phone. The camera sings its artificial shudder. My hands discover a tremor and hide in my lap. This morning in my apartment, a third-floor walk-up that smells like rosemary when the neighbor cooks. I stood at my round table and wrapped gifts with painter's tape because I was out of proper ribbon. I teach 7th grade language arts for $58 and $500 a year. Numbers you learn to fold the way you fold sheets in a too-small drawer. Still, I'd saved. A hand-dyed linen scarf for my mother in a blue that suggests oceans, $160 after the holiday discount. A brushed steel fountain pen for my father, his initials engraved in a serif that felt like him, $120 with the case. For Kara, a slim out-of-print photozine from an LA exhibit we'd once promised to see together, $95 plus postage. I wrote a note inside the cover, 3 sentences neat and hopeful. Hope can be industrious when it needs to be. Back on the needlepoint perch, I smooth the hem of my dark skirt and find the floor with my heels. Kara is documenting angles. Dad refreshes his bourbon with that little satisfied tilt of bottle and glass that means he has decided we are having a good time. Mom rearranges sugar cookies on a plate my grandmother once swore was too fancy for every day, but somehow is never too fancy for show. The card in my pocket warms against my palm like a small unlit stone. "I'm going to get some air," I say. My voice is mild enough to belong to anyone. Aunt Ruth crosses the rug and sets her hand on my shoulder. Her fingers press a quiet code into the wool of my sweater. "You are not imagining this," she whispers. I nod because the alternative would require a different life. The coat in the hall closet is mine, though it smells like the cedar of this house and the ghost of a fireplace that hasn't been lit in years. I button it from the bottom-up habit superstition armor and step onto the porch. The cold is clean and full of stars. Snow makes the kind of noise underfoot you only hear when nobody is talking. My car wears a thin crust of frost. I brush a porthole clear with the sleeve of my glove and climb in. The drive to the Pittock Mansion overlook takes 11 minutes when the lights are with you. The wipers hush-hush across the glass as the city rises in front of me, a basin of constellations pretending to be streets. Portland carries on kitchens, steaming buses, sighing. Somebody somewhere laughing at a joke I will never hear. I put the heater on low and leave my gloves on anyway. When did I become so easy to overlook? I ask the empty car, and the question fogs the windshield in a soft oval that collapses in on itself. I take the card from my pocket, a flimsy mountain landscape that feels suddenly heavier than it ought to. It is a cheap thing, nothing of consequence, and yet it holds a shape my body recognizes without wanting to. 29 years can fold themselves deceptively small. I don't cry at first. I watch the city smear into watercolor when a gust takes the snow sideways. The stereo, still tuned to the station Dad likes, catches nothing but static out here. The quiet settles until it isn't quiet. It's a kind of presence. My hand stops shaking. I flatten the card in my lap one last time and slide it back into the envelope. The heater ticks as it decides how much warmth to spend. Outside, the lights don't blink, they burn. I sit there and let the cold prick my cheeks, present to the fact of the night and the shape of what it has shown me. By morning, the card rides in my coat pocket like a flat stone. I set it on the kitchen table beside a chipped mug and watch the mountain on its front take the light and give none back. The apartment is quiet except for the radiator ticking like a metronome no one agreed to. I open the blinds. Portland presents a wet January, all slate and softened edges. I pull the blue shoebox from the hall closet, the one I tell myself is for holiday things. Ribbon that's lost its curl. A paper star I made in a workshop 2 winters ago. Beneath it, the strata I've avoided, snapshots, folded programs, envelopes with handwriting I know better than my own. I spread everything on the rug and sit cross-legged at a small clearing in a paper forest. In one photo, I'm 13, braced at our kitchen table, behind a cake whose frosting sweated under the lights. Candles lean like tired matchsticks. A plastic knife rests in a smear of store-bought icing that dyes everything it touches the wrong shade of red. I'm smiling as if my cheeks had been instructed. In another, Kara, at 16, stands under a chandelier at the Langdon Hotel dress sequins, catching a galaxy of flashes. Dad's arm is a claim at her shoulders, while Mom fastens a string of pearls that throws back every bulb in the room. Between the two photos sits the space where an explanation should go. Acceptance letters form a tidy stack. Portland State for me, renewable scholarships circled in violet ink, paper clipped to it, a note in Dad's quick slant. Proud of you. Look into work study for incidentals, for Kara, a glossy folder from West Coast Institute of Design, a heavy note card tucked inside. We're so proud. Focus on your portfolios. We'll take care of the rest. The pen is pressed so hard the words ghost through the paper. I drag the coffee table closer and open a manila folder labeled euphemistically. I realize now. Records. Loan statements, $23,980. $80. Outstanding by the time I graduated, despite 20-hour weeks at the campus bookstore and a summer shelving paperbacks that stained my fingertips. An email from Dad declining to co-sign my first lease timing is tricky. You're so capable. You've got this. A clipping from a local magazine about Kara's immersion semester in Florence tuition, quoted like a luxury car, the caption crediting family support. Beside them, my current rent agreement, $1,200 for a 1-bedroom with a heater that chooses favorites in February. I keep working until past noon, a quiet excavation. I try not to narrate as I go. The mind loves a story. Today I want evidence. When I find a birthday card addressed to me. Dear Nora, so proud of your independence, it breaks my rule by speaking too cleanly. In the margin, I write what I mean independence as in unattended. I slide the Christmas card between the last 2 pages of my journal and print 3 words above it, ordinary and sufficient, no more bargaining. My phone skips across the table with a family thread notification. Mom casual supper Sunday. Your father's doing steaks. I type, I have plans. Not an alibi, not a novel, just that. The screen waits expectantly, as if it could interpret silence if I held it at the right angle. A minute later, Kara moving day. Next week, could you bring the SUV Mom and Dad tied up with numbers stuff? I thumb a reply and erase it twice before I settle on, can't this time. Good luck with the move. The bubbles appear, disappear, reappear, like a tide that doesn't decide. Then the thread goes quiet. At school the next day, 7th period dissolves into an argument about narrators who tell the truth and the truth that asks to be told. But how do you know what's reliable, Tyler wants to know. You don't. I say writing unreliable on the whiteboard and underlining it hard enough to squeal. You cross-check with what the characters do. The class hums along that sweet edge where the room forgets it's a room. The bell rings. On my desk, a folded sheet from Maya, who never speaks in class. Thank you for letting us write from someone else's shoes. It made mine stop hurting. The letters dip and recover like a skater avoiding a crack. On Thursday, I sit in a chair that threatens to swallow me while a clock with no numbers ticks on a pale wall. The plant in the corner is either thriving or pretending to. Dr. Wyatt's glasses catch a square of light that shifts as the minutes do. You keep using the word invisible, he says. He has a way of pressing on a word until it reveals a door. To whom I consider the ceiling its faint hairline seems, to the people who should know me best. He nods once. That's 2 claims, he says. What they should know, and that they don't. He doesn't write anything down. I like that. He pours water that tastes like nothing, and somehow like permission. When I leave, the receptionist slides a receipt across the counter, $95, and I slide my card back to her without apology. Saturday mornings find me at a community studio between a bicycle repair shop and a bakery that keeps the whole block honest. The sign on the door says Clay. Community, in block letters, no flourish. Mira, who runs it, wears overalls freckled with feldspar and a streak of cobalt on her cheek like war paint she forgot to remove. Center first, she says, leaning her hip against the wheel stand as if that's the only furniture she trusts. Everything you do after that is a correction. My clay resists my palms, then yields when I stop trying to force it. Gentle, but insistent, Mira says over the whir, and I feel the skin along my forearms loosen its old argument with a kind of effort I can sustain. After class, I pin the receipt to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon and write in small letters beneath it, tuition paid in hands. At home, I take down the last frame photo of a family holiday and replace it with a charcoal print of a wind-gnarled tree on a cliff. The picture is mostly negative space. The branches grip at the air. I move through the rooms, wiping surfaces with a damp cloth, collecting old flyers and rubber bands, and things that announce themselves by getting in the way. On the bookshelf, the row of hardcovers Dad once called the basics makes space for a dog-eared collection of essays I actually reread, and a slim book of poems by someone whose name I'd mispronounced until last week. On the nightstand, the shoeboxed evidence returns to its shelf. I don't lock the door on it. I just let it rest. When Mom calls mid-week, her voice has the kind of brightness you turn on for guests. Darling, I was thinking you could host Easter. Kara's schedule is hectic with her new line, and it would showcase your cooking. The compliment lands with a provisional stamp. I picture my tiny table, its ring from a teapot I never remember to lift before it steams. I'm not available to host, I say. I hear her inhale to the top of her lungs. Well, she says, gathering. We'll work something out. After I hang up, a voicemail arrives with the flattened tone of an email read aloud. Families make time. That's the message. I let the voicemail live where it lands in the cloud rather than my chest. One gray afternoon, Principal Alvarez asks me to step into his office and then watches me stand there holding the threshold like an umbrella. Ms. Keene, he says, gesturing to the chair sit. He slides a folder across the desk. Evaluations and engagement data from your narrative unit. He smiles, a rare opening in his weather. Exceptional. I scan comments that belong more to my students than to me. This assignment helped me explain something I didn't know I could explain. I wrote a scene that made my dad cry. The data columns look like a city skyline. We're running the summer writing lab again, he adds softer. I need someone to lead it. He waits as if I might be considering. I nod. Yes, I say, and it's not a favor. An email pings on my walk back to class. Northwest Educators Conference invites your session proposal on perspective writing. My thumb hovers over delete out of reflex, then moves to reply, mischief of a different flavor. I send 3 sentences and attach what they asked for. No more, no petition. When the acceptance arrives the next week, I am in the copy room fighting a machine that prefers to believe in paper jams. Ms. Cho from next door high-fives me with toner on her palm. "You look taller," she says, and then pretends not to have said it. On payday, I log into my bank and slide $450 into an account I have renamed Home, not in the possessive way, but in the verb sense, something you do by adjusting by aiming true. The number looks smaller than the want and larger than the week before. I screenshot it anyway and save it in a folder named for a street I like to walk on my way home. Kara calls at 12:41 on a Tuesday night. My phone blares from the kitchen counter where I left it to charge. By the time I reach it, the ringing has pulled the apartment seams tight. I answer because once I would have run from a shower with shampoo in my hair for less. "He left," she says, not bothering with hello. She swallows. "He just walked out after dinner." The way she says walked makes it sound like a violation of physics. "I need you," she says. There is a noise in the background that could be a TV or a small animal. I grip the edge of the counter. "I'm sorry that happened," I say. "I can talk at noon tomorrow. There is a delay long enough to count to 5 in." Noon. It isn't a question about time. I have to teach in the morning, I say. I fly through lunch, but I can make 11 minutes out of it. Silence, and then a softer echo. "Okay," she says. "I guess I can try to sleep." She is quiet a beat, and then adds in a voice I don't know well. "Thanks, Nora." After we hang up, I expect the follow-up call within the hour that would twist my choice into a story I'd recognize. When it doesn't come, the night gets its temperature back. The next day, between second and third period, I find my phone vibrating against a stack of rubric sheets. A voicemail from Mom clips sentences about priorities and appearances and the shame of abandoning family. I delete it, while the progress bar fills a second version of counting to 10. In the courtyard after lunch, Samir from Science asks if I've seen the new budget meeting invite. He leans on the back of a bench, squints at the winter sky. "If they cut clubs, we fold debate into advisory," he says, half asking, half thinking aloud. "Or we get creative," I say, and tilt my face toward a patch of thin sun until it feels like something to work with. Saturday's clay. I pull the wheel on and lean in. Mira sets a hand near the base of my vessel without touching it and hums a note so low it vibrates the metal tray. "Less muscle, more rhythm," she says. "Let the spin do some of the lifting." The cylinder rises, wobbles, finds its line. "Look at that," she says, loud enough for the room to hear and exactly as private as a secret. Later, as we clean tools, she eyes the card I've been using to rib the walls. "That from a greeting pack?" she asks, grinning. I flip it over snowy peak and different sky. "Something like that," I say, and drop it back into the apron pocket where it has learned to live without speaking. On a Wednesday after school, the district posts internal positions, and my name sits next to language arts lead for the summer lab. I collect my students' drafts and sit at my desk until the custodian flicks the lights to remind me buildings have bedtime. On the way out, I pass the trophy case that manages to polish old years without blinding the current ones. My reflection wavers between a medal for cross-country and a photograph of a pep band in matching shirts. I stand there long enough to catch myself looking and then go. At home, I water the basil that survived December by refusing the window drafts and turn the oven to warm for bread I won't be baking. The walls hold fewer faces and more landscape now. One print of a river at dusk, another of a canyon ledge under a weather traveling from somewhere else. I wash a single plate and let it stand in the rack unbothered by the way it leans. On the fridge under the lemon magnet, the pottery receipt sits beside a new slip from the print shop. 15 copies student anthology. I press them flat and text Ms. Cho a photo. She replies with a string of capital letters that somehow manage not to shout. Evening returns with its slow confidence. The building settles. The upstairs neighbor's dog decides squirrels and dreams are still worth warning. I open my journal, and the card falls to the table without dramatics. I write about Tyler's question and Maya's note, and the way silence sometimes feels like a room I can leave the door open on. I write about the clay under my hands that resists and then permits, about the way no gets easier when I say it to an empty room to hear how it sounds with different punctuation. Before I turn out the lamp, I check my phone without urgency. The family thread has stirred a flurry of messages about dates and addresses and RSVP links names. I know a location in serif font. I read the details, set the phone face down, and reach to switch off the light. The apartment takes a breath I can feel. The card on the table is just paper again. The room holds. The invitation serif address turns out to be a vineyard northeast of the city where Mount Hood keeps its white shoulder in the distance like a chaperone who has vowed not to intervene. I park at the end of a line of sedans that shine like beetles in the sun and sit for a count of 10. The dress I chose is sage, cut simple, steady against my ribs. I swipe a fingerprint from the inside of my windshield and step out into air that tastes faintly of crushed grape and mown grass. Kara spots me near the entrance, all sequins and angles. She lifts her arm and sends a scatter of light across the walkway. Nora, she calls, making my name sound like a surprise and a dare. The hug misses my shoulder and lands somewhere near my hair. You came. Her eyes slide on instinct to my left, cataloging whether I brought anyone to stand between me and the old choreography. I didn't. You look great, I say, and mean it. For all her glitter, the skin under her eyes is thin as paper. Mom arrives, as if my name had rung a bell only she hears. Her smile stretches elastic that remembers a smaller shape. Darling, she says a word that has volume settings. That color is practical. Her gaze takes the tour necklace shoes, the bag I bought secondhand, and had re-stitched by a seamster who loved it too much to charge me enough. Dad follows, tugging at a tie that hangs looser than it used to. There's my independent girl, he says, the phrase polished, ready for guests. He glances at the surrounding greenery as if it were a deal closing. Your apartment must be feeling cramped. It fits, I say. The breeze lifts a corner of the seating chart and drops it again. Aunt Ruth arrives like rescue disguised as coincidence. Look at you, she whispers in my ear as she presses her cheek to mine. Standing square. Her perfume is something old that chose to age rather than be replaced. When she steps back, her eyes flick toward my parents, then back. I nod once. None of it needs saying. Cousin Felix's ceremony is all tasteful arrangements and cleverly concealed microphones. The officiant's voice rides the air like a low sail. Vows pass through the rows without snagging. I listen the way you listen, in a language you understand but don't dream in. When the couple kisses, the vineyard claps on cue. A row of sparrows lifts and resettles on a wire as if it had been booked. The reception unfolds under white tents. Heat gathers at the edges, the kind that leaves your skin looking dewy in photographs and wilted in mirrors. I collect a glass of something pale and cold, and stand off to the side as staff fairy trays like intentions. Kara drifts back, touching my wrist with fingers that tremble and pretend not to. I wasn't sure you'd come, she says. I RSVP'd, I answer, then soften it. I wanted to see Felix happy. The music starts as a designer approximation of joy. There are details I would have missed before. Dad is at the bar, leaning too far over the counter to speak low to the bartender who keeps his face smooth as a pond, then returns a card with a small shake, the universal language of decline. Mom's handbag tonight is not the one with the gold hardware. It's a leather clutch whose corners show their years honestly. The florist's assistant argues with someone over delivery fees. A photographer with 2 bodies slung across his chest says net 30 as if it tasted bad. None of it is dramatic. It is simply the kind of background that stops being background when you are awake to it. Relatives find me the way people find shade. Nora booms Uncle Peter, who has never said my name at a conversational decibel. Heard you're doing big things at the school. His hand lands on my shoulder like a friendly paperweight. Always knew you'd make something of yourself. He tips his head toward Dad, already telling the story for us. She's our practical one, Mom says, as if reading from a place card so disciplined. The word disciplined walks around the table and sits in my chair uninvited. Felix and his new wife swirl past in a choreography that looks effortless because someone else made it so. I smile when appropriate answer questions excuse myself when I mean to. Near the edge of the lawn, a row of roses climbs a trellis blooming as if no one had demanded it. I step into the small shade they offer, draw a line of breath in and a line of breath out, running away again. Kara's voice comes from behind me without the usual gleam. She sits on the low stone ledge, and the sequins hush as they meet the rough surface. I sit 2 feet away. Taking a minute, I say, "That's different." She blinks, as if the world has changed focal lengths. When she looks at me, the mascara at the corners of her eyes admits to the heat. "You're different," she says, and the sentence doesn't accuse, it reports. I look at the vineyard at the rows that draw lines all the way to the mountain's shoulder. I realized how unfair it was, I say, simple as an invoice. She huffs a breath that almost becomes a laugh. "To you," she says, and then stares down at her hands as if they might supply a script. And to me, she adds, voice thin, "They never made me do the things you did. I don't know how to live on what I make." The admission sits between us like a glass left in sun. "That sounds hard," I say. I keep my hands where they are. She nods a single hinge. "My lease is up in 6 weeks. They were supposed to help with the increase. Dad says things are in flux." The word floats, then sinks. I don't even know what groceries cost if I don't put them on a card. We sit until the shade cools. She touches her cheek with the back of one finger and lifts off a small crescent of mascara that leaves a moon on her skin. "I hate this dress," she says suddenly. "It's not even mine." She laughs without mirth. "I borrowed it from a girl who has sisters who swap." She looks at me, then really looks. "You have a life," she says, envy-free. "I have receipts." Somebody calls her name from the tent, and the noise reattaches to her like Velcro. She stands. "You're not going to fix this for me, are you?" Her mouth twists as if the question surprises her. "No," I say. "I can tell you what worked for me." She nods like someone learning a new word. "Okay." She straightens the dress that is not hers and walks back toward the music without looking back, which feels like a kind of courage. Cake appears triumphant in tears. The couple feeds each other with choreographed mess. Dad corners me by the dessert table where Lemon is posing a celebration. "You're good with numbers," he says, as if it were a compliment I've earned from him. "Teachers understand budgets." He clears his throat. "There's a lot of movement right now. The market." He flicks a crumb that doesn't exist from his cuff. A little advice would go a long way. The phrase lands without specifics. I hold my plate at chest height as if it could stop a shot. Advice is different from funds, I say. He opens his mouth and closes it. Before he tries again, Aunt Ruth materializes with a napkin and a grin. "Don't let anyone talk you out of the corner piece," she says to me, light as air. And to my father, heavier. "You were due at the photographer's table 10 minutes ago." She guides him with 2 fingers at his elbow and leaves me an actual corner, which tastes faintly of relief. The dance floor calls the extroverts and the brave. I drift around its edges, chatting with second cousins whose names return to me 2 beats late. A woman I don't know gushes that she follows Kara's posts and loves the way she makes luxury feel like a friend. I smile and excuse myself to refill water. On my way back, I hear Mom near a cluster of aunts describing how proud she is of how capable Nora has always been, as if my capability had provided them a service. When she catches my eye, she tilts her head toward a group of older relatives. "Come say hello to the people who remember you as a darling little thing," she stage whispers. I touch her wrist gentle, but refusing the tug. "In a bit," I say. I stand my ground and watch 3 small birds fight over a crumb the size of punctuation. At 9, the bouquet rises and falls, hands fly. Someone whooped before she caught it, because that's how you ensure the photo. I step into the cooler air at the edge of the parking lot. The tents hum behind me like a hive that knows its work. My shoes come off easier than I expect. I lean against the hood of my car and feel the day's heat leaving the metal. The mountain has shed its afternoon gloss and stands there honest a chalk line against a deepening sky. I drive west without telling anyone I'm leaving. The highway unspools. The dark holds. Towns pass a gas station lit like a stage, a diner with a single truck outside, and a sign promising pie that probably keeps its promises. When the road bends toward water, the air changes salt, and something old enough to have no name. I pull into the turnout I've used before and kill the lights. The ocean is there whether I look at it or not. When I do, it steadies the edges of my vision. I walk down to the sand, barefoot sandals swinging from my fingers, the cold biting just enough to prove the night. The shoreline hums. A couple laughs somewhere to my left. A dog barrels after something only it can see. I stand still long enough for my breath to find the waves measure. The card isn't in my pocket tonight. I left it on the table under a stack of drafts. My hands are empty. I curl my toes into the wet, feel the pull let go. When I return to the car, the windshield wears a thin skin of damp that my sleeve clears in 2 swipes. The dashboard clock glows an hour I don't need to translate. I sit with the door open and the engine off and listen to the cooling tick and the long reach of water, both of them working on what they touch. The phone in my bag remains face down. The night doesn't ask me for proofs or apologies. It makes room simple as tide. After a while, I start the engine and turn the car toward the road that brought me here. The headlights find the stripe, the miles take me up and over. The city will still be there when the highway drops me back into it. For now, the drive is its own country with borders drawn by whatever I can see and the fact that I decide when to stop. A week after the vineyard, I pull into my parents' driveway at 5:58 and sit with the engine ticking down. The porch light stutters between on and not quite catching moths in an indecisive glow. I set a timer on my watch for 2 hours and leave the keys in my coat pocket like a promise to myself that only I can cash. Mom opens the door before I can knock twice. "Nora," she says, as if she's caught my name before it could hit the floor. Her hug lands at the right coordinates, but not the right depth. "You look wonderful," she adds, scanning me for where to put the compliment. The living room smells faintly of lemon cleaner and something more diffuse, like a room trying to remember being new. The Italian sectional is gone, replaced by a beige sofa with legs that show their bolts without shame. The crystal vase is missing from the coffee table. In its place sits a bowl of wrapped mints you could buy anywhere. Dad rises from his old armchair by reflex. His collar loosens with him. Punctual as ever, he says, and makes a half joke of looking at the clock. Kara is already in the corner chair, hands twisting and untwisting a paper napkin until it looks like a small cloud on her knee. She gives me a small wave. Aunt Ruth isn't here. This is the kind of conversation they designed to keep witnesses out of. Mom sweeps in with a tray of cups, every saucer the same pattern. "Coffee," she asks, pouring without waiting. Family should sit down together for things that matter. The phrasing sounds practiced. We sit. The cushions breathe like polite animals. Dad clears his throat, finds a pitch he likes. "The market's been unusual." He begins a sentence that keeps itself from specifics. Some positions didn't pan out. Cash flow is tight while we restructure. He glances toward the empty place where the sectional used to be. Mom places her hand near my wrist and leaves it there warm without contact. "We might be a little underwater on the house," she says softly, as if the volume of water depends on how you say it. Kara looks up from her napkin cloud. "My lease renewal is next month," she murmurs. "They raised rates again." Her eyes dart to Mom and Dad as if to confirm the sequence. Dad exhales through his nose. "We were hoping," he says, aiming for reasonable, "you might be able to help for a couple of months. Just until things stabilize." He says, just like it's a bridge that will certainly lead where he thinks. Family helping family. Mom adds, and there's the phrase that always arrives dressed as principal. I take a sip of coffee and let its heat occupy the seconds. The timer on my wrist hums quietly as if to say you are still here. I set the cup down and reach into my bag. The envelope is soft at the corners from being handled and not destroyed. I slide the card out and set it in the middle of the table mountainside, up the sky blue enough to lie. Mom's face flinches so fast only the light catches it. Dad frowns, annoyed at props he didn't approve. "This." I say tapping this printed snow was my Christmas present. I keep my voice in the shallow end. This is when I understood what's been true a very long time. Dad lifts an eyebrow that would like to be a gavel. "A card." "Nora, we're talking about real problems." His hand cuts a small arc in the air. I keep my gaze on the card on how the fake mountain doesn't sweat under kitchen lights. 13, I say. Grocery store cake at the kitchen table candles, tilting like apologies. Kara's 16 at the Langdon with a string of pearls, and a room that cost more than my first beater car. I don't look at Kara when I say it. I don't need to. my scholarship with a note to get a campus job, Kara's design program with a note telling her not to worry about anything but her portfolio. The evidence doesn't rise in me like anger. It stacks square and level the way bricks do when you lay them sober. Mom's cup rattles once against its saucer. We never meant she starts. I'm sure you didn't mean it. I say not to soften, but to keep the air factual. But it happened, consistently. I lay the next sheet down without taking it from my bag. When I asked for a cosigner for my first apartment, the answer was, timing is tricky. When Kara wanted a downtown place, you found a way. I touch the edge of the card again. This is the shorthand for years of that. Dad leans back as if he's been pushed when he was braced for pull. We gave you everything you needed, he says, and there's the line polished to a shine. Everything she needed, Kara says, quiet, but unmissable. Her voice scrapes at the end like a match. We all turn. She keeps going. And everything I wanted. She looks at me then, and it isn't a performance. I benefited, she says, like she's reading the plain text out loud. The room adjusts to the new gravity. Mom's eyes gloss but don't spill. Dad's jaw decides to hold. So you won't help your sister, Mom asks, and it's an honest question under years of habit. I won't be the bank, I say. I will help her find what she can afford. I'll show her how I budgeted when my paycheck felt like confetti. I'll send listings, I'll walk neighborhoods. But I am not patching a hole I didn't make by cutting one in my own floor. I don't raise my voice. The words sit where they land. Dad straightens. After all we've done, he says the old song. He doesn't finish the verse. Kara closes her eyes once. This isn't repayment, I say. This is me telling the truth. The truth isn't sharp. It is heavy in a way that strengthens what holds it. Mom's fingers leave the air near my wrist and go to her wedding band. She twists. The metal makes a tiny sound that could be anything. What happens now, she asks, and for the first time all evening, the sentence contains only itself. Respect, I say, and equality if we're going to have a relationship that doesn't require me to disappear. I slide the card back to my side of the table, a small weather system reclaimed. I'm willing to help in ways that don't bankrupt me. I won't underwrite the old pattern. Silence isn't empty. It migrates to whatever can hold it. It sits on the new sofa, crosses to Dad's chair, hovers above the place where the vase used to be. Outside, a car passes, and the porch light catches up to itself for 3 consecutive seconds. Kara speaks first. I can move in with roommates, she says to the room and to herself. I can figure out a budget. She looks at me, and there's a question in it, but not the old kind. Can you show me that spreadsheet you use? I nod. She nods back and sits straighter, as if the chair suddenly decided to help. Dad stands like the meeting is over because he's standing. We'll think about all this, he says to the air. He moves to the window and stares out at the quiet street as if the neighborhood might arrive with a verdict. Mom gathers the untouched coffee cups as if they were answers. I check my timer, 17 minutes left. I don't owe them the rest. I stand and push in my chair. Thank you for hearing me, I say. It isn't triumph. It's a receipt. Mom nods, lips pressed thin, then not as thin. Drive safe, she says, and it's the best sentence in her mouth tonight. Kara catches my wrist as I pass squeezes. Text me tomorrow. I will, I say. Dad doesn't turn from the window, but his reflection nods. Outside, the air cools my face cleanly. The night takes me without conditions. I get in the car, start the engine, roll forward, and then pause. A star shows itself through a slash in the clouds, and then another. The porch light behind me steadies. Months follow that do not ask for permission. The summer lab opens under fluorescent hum, and Ordinary Miracles kids who hate writing make zines about their grandmother's kitchens and a map of the city that begins at a bus stop no one else put on paper. Ms. Cho and I staple booklets in a rhythm the copy machine approves. When the conference comes, I stand behind a lectern with a mic that makes me larger than I am and talk about perspective as if it were furniture you could rearrange to fit more people in the room. Teachers I've never met ask for the handouts. They write their email addresses neatly as if bravely. I go home to an apartment that looks back at me without demands. Kara texts photos that are not for the feed. A small room painted the careful green of second chances, a thrifted lamp with a shade too big, but a switch that clicks secrets, a sheet of paper with columns labeled "Rent Food Transit Debt" in letters that take their time. We meet on a Tuesday at a cafe that overcharges for pastries and gives away light. I slide a copy of my spreadsheet across the table and show her how to change the numbers without breaking the equations. She orders drip coffee and drinks it like she's proving something to herself. When we part, she hugs me in a way that includes both of us. Mom calls on Sundays now. The conversations are shorter and less staged. Sometimes she asks about the students. Sometimes she tells me which flowers came up in the backyard where tulips don't care about the market. She hesitates before she says she's proud, as if testing the word on her tongue. Dad texts when the Blazers win, or when he sees an article about books in schools. Once he sends a photo of a casserole. He made a comment about how the recipe was weirdly mathy. None of it fixes anything. It makes different weather. By fall, I have saved enough to change the name of my home account to the address of a building I walk past in the evenings. In winter, an agent with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense hands me a pen at a table with too many papers. I sign where she tells me. My name looks the same, and not at all. When I carry the first box up the stairs of the condo, it's full of books and bowls whose edges waver in the way of things made by hands that learn to center. Moving day is not a crowd. It is a curated list. Aunt Ruth arrives with a quilt that smells like cedar and keeps the room's temperature the way a person can sometimes. Your grandmother kept this for the daughter who needed a steady pattern, she says. She meant you. We smooth it across the bed, fingers skimming faded triangles that repeat into logic. Ms. Cho appears with a plant that could be basil or not. The tag only says water when dry. Mira comes last, setting a shallow ceramic dish on the counter, the glaze a quiet storm of blue. For keys, she says, and kisses the air near my cheek. That night, boxes stacked like a skyline around me, I mount a small frame on the wall by the door. Inside it, pressed as flat as it ever was, sits the mountain card. The glass doesn't make it grand, it makes it honest. I hang a second frame beside it, a printout of the email that began, "We're pleased to accept your session," the subject line trimmed by the printer until it reads, "Only accepted." On the table beneath, I place the key to the old apartment and a yellow sticky note with the forwarding address for the security deposit. I don't need to keep either long. Dinner is simple and not an audition soup that tastes like what it is. Bread that cracks at the crust, a salad that takes oil without complaint. The table seats 3 with room. Aunt Ruth, Kara, and I lift spoons at nearly the same moment. The window throws rectangles of evening onto the floor. The apartment breathes in time with the building. Kara tells a story about her roommate's cat that starts as a complaint and ends as affection. Aunt Ruth refolds her napkin into smaller squares while she listens. No one mentions the vineyard. No one mentions the card on the wall unless you count the way our eyes meet and hold. After they leave, I rinse bowls under a tap that behaves, set them in the rack at angles that won't chip and stand still until the hum in my shoulders winds down. The street below offers ordinary sounds. Footsteps, a laugh leaning on a railing, a bus sighing at the corner. I take the last box labeled books and find the place on the shelf where the slim spine of a first edition can be companion to a paperback with creases like a topographical map. I water the plant Ms. Cho brought and choose to believe the instructions. I open the window and let the city's weather step in. In the small hallway by the door, the framed card sits without apology. I touch the glass once, not to bless it, not to curse it, only to confirm that the thing that changed is not in the frame. I turn off the light, and the apartment keeps being itself in the dark. In the bedroom, the quilt holds its pattern. I lie down, listen to the building settle, and count backward from 10 for the old habit of it. The room answers by staying. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.